He's such a boring loser. I deserve so much better. My name is Paul Ridley. I'm 53 years old, and I coordinate freight shipments for driftline construction out of Des Moines. I fix problems. I make sure things get where they need to go, when they need to be there. 27 years married to Sandra, and she just said that about me in front of 40 people at our daughter's graduation dinner. The words hung in the air like smoke. Nobody moved. My sister Beth stopped cutting her chicken. My brother-in-law Dennis put down his beer bottle so slowly I could hear the glass touch the table. Lena, my 22-year-old daughter, the whole reason we were celebrating, looked like someone had slapped her. But I knew this was coming. Not the public announcement, not the theatrics, but the leaving part. I'd seen the signs for months. Sandra had been different since she started working with that trainer, Troy. Late nights at the gym, new clothes, new attitude. She'd started talking about finding herself and living authentically. When your wife of 27 years starts using phrases like that, you know trouble's brewing. The strange part was how calm I felt, like I'd been holding my breath for months and finally exhaled. Sandra kept talking, gesturing toward the bar where Troy waited like some kind of rescue boat. She was explaining to everyone how she'd outgrown me, how she needed someone who understood her potential. I reached into my jacket pocket. "Paul," Lena whispered. "Dad, what?" I pulled out a small white envelope. Not fancy, just business-sized paper with Sandra's name written across the front in my handwriting. "For you," I said, and handed it to her. Sandra stopped mid-sentence. She looked at the envelope like it might bite her. The restaurant had gone completely quiet. Even the busboys had stopped clearing tables. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it." She did. Right there, in front of God and everybody. I watched her face change. First confusion, then understanding, then something that looked like panic. "Paul," she said, her voice different now, smaller. "What did you—" "Read it out loud," I said, "since we're sharing everything with everyone tonight." Her hands started shaking. That's when I knew she understood exactly what she was holding, and what it meant for the show she'd just put on. I should probably explain how we got here. Sandra and I met in college. She was studying communications. I was in logistics management. She was bright, ambitious, full of plans. I was the steady guy who showed up when he said he would. We balanced each other out, or so I thought. After we married, I took a job with Driftline Construction. Good company, steady work, solid benefits. Sandra worked part-time at various places, a marketing firm, then a nonprofit. Then she tried real estate for a while. Nothing stuck. She always said she was between opportunities, searching for something meaningful. When Lena was born, Sandra stayed home. I worked overtime to cover the difference. 50-hour weeks became 60. 60 became 70 during busy seasons. I missed some school plays, some parent conferences. Sandra handled those things. I handled the mortgage, the car payments, the college fund. For 20 years this worked. Then Lena went to college and Sandra got restless. She joined a gym, started talking about personal growth and life coaching, met Troy, who was apparently more than willing to help her discover her authentic self. The warning signs weren't subtle. Late nights at the gym, new workout clothes that cost more than my work boots, phone calls she took in the other room. When I'd ask about her day, she'd get defensive. "You wouldn't understand," she'd say. "You're not exactly evolving." 6 months ago, I found a receipt for a hotel room in Cedar Rapids. When I asked about it, Sandra said she'd gone to a wellness seminar, alone, for 2 days, on a weekend when I thought she was visiting her mother. That's when I called my lawyer friend, Dennis Peterson. We'd coached Little League together years back. Good man, honest. I asked him a hypothetical question about postnuptial agreements and asset protection. "Just curious," I said. Dennis wasn't fooled. "Paul, you need to be careful here. If you're thinking what I think you're thinking, timing matters." I started paying attention, real attention. Not just to what Sandra was saying, but to what she wasn't saying. How she looked at me, how she talked about our future, or rather, how she stopped talking about our future altogether. 3 months ago, she mentioned Troy for the first time. My trainer thinks I should consider a career change, she said over dinner. He thinks I have untapped potential. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went to my office and started moving money. Quietly, carefully, within legal limits, into accounts Sandra didn't know about, into trusts that protected what I'd spent 27 years building. Because when your wife starts taking relationship advice from her personal trainer, you'd better start protecting yourself. The breaking point came 2 weeks before graduation. I walked into our house after work and found Sandra on the phone. She was laughing in a way I hadn't heard in years. Light. Young. When she saw me, the laughter stopped. I have to go, she said into the phone. Yeah, I will. Tomorrow. She hung up and busied herself with dishes that were already clean. Who was that? I asked. Just my trainer, Troy. He was telling me about this nutrition plan. I knew it wasn't about nutrition. That night, I couldn't pretend anymore. Sandra was in the bathroom getting ready for bed. I sat on our bed, the bed we'd shared for 27 years, and looked around the room. Her side of the closet was half empty. When had that happened? I walked to her dresser and saw a printed email sticking out from under her jewelry box. I shouldn't have read it, but I did. It was a reservation confirmation for a resort in Colorado. 2 guests. Check-in date. 3 days after Lena's graduation. Sandra's name and Troy's name. They'd planned their getaway before she'd even told me she was leaving. I sat there for a long time. Not angry, just sad. Sad for what we'd been. Sad for what we'd never be again. And sad that she'd chosen to blow up our family at our daughter's graduation instead of having an honest conversation months earlier. But mostly, I felt clear. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what needed to happen. I went to my office and printed 3 documents. The post-nuptial agreement Sandra had signed 5 years ago when we refinanced the house, the bank statements showing the trust fund transfers, and the notices canceling her access to our joint accounts effective the day after graduation. I folded them carefully and put them in an envelope. Then I went back to bed. Sandra was already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay there listening to her breathe and realized I felt lighter than I had in years. In the morning, Sandra was excited about graduation, talking about the dinner, about who was coming, about the dress she'd bought. She was performing happiness, playing the role of proud mother and devoted wife one last time. I made coffee and watched her practice her lines. "This is such a special day," she said. "I want everything to be perfect." "It will be," I said. She had no idea how perfect it was about to get. I put the envelope in my jacket pocket and went to work. Just another day at Driftline Construction, coordinating shipments, solving problems, making sure things arrived at their destination right on schedule. Sandra started screaming before she finished reading the first page. "You bastard!" Her voice cut through the restaurant like a fire alarm. "You absolute bastard!" Every head in the place turned toward us. The waiter stopped pouring wine at the next table. A couple by the window put down their menus to stare. "Is there a problem here?" The manager appeared from nowhere, wringing his hands. "Yes, there's a problem." Sandra waved the papers in the air. "My husband just..." She stopped herself, realizing she was about to explain our legal situation to a stranger in front of 40 family members and friends. "Please keep your voice down," I said quietly. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" Her laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "You planned this. You knew I was going to..." She stopped again, looking around the table at our daughter, at my sister, at Sandra's own mother who'd flown in from Phoenix. "Knew you were going to what?" I asked. Sandra's face went red. She couldn't finish that sentence without admitting she'd planned to humiliate me in public, that she'd orchestrated this moment for maximum drama, that Troy sitting at the bar wasn't a coincidence. "This can't be legal," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. "You can't just move our money without telling me." "I didn't move our money," I said. I moved my money, according to the postnuptial agreement you signed 5 years ago. The one your lawyer advised you to sign when we refinanced the house. Dennis, my brother-in-law, cleared his throat. Sandra, maybe you should— Don't, she snapped at him. Don't you dare take his side. I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm suggesting you might want to discuss this privately. But Sandra was past reasoning. She stood up, still holding the papers, and looked directly at Troy. He was trying to blend into the bar crowd, but 40 people staring at him made that impossible. Tell them, she said to him. Tell them what we talked about. Troy looked like he wanted to disappear. This wasn't how they'd planned it. They'd expected me to sit there quietly while Sandra announced her new life. They hadn't expected paperwork. Sandra, Troy said, maybe we should— Tell them how you make me feel alive, she demanded. Tell them how much better you are than him. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Even the kitchen sounds had stopped. Troy walked over slowly like a man approaching a car accident. When he reached our table, he put his hand on Sandra's shoulder. Babe, he said, let's just go. We don't need this drama. That's when I knew they'd talked about this moment. They'd rehearsed it. Sandra's big announcement, Troy's supportive presence, my expected humiliation. They'd planned the whole show. Except they hadn't planned for the envelope. You can go, I said to Troy. But Sandra might want to finish reading first, especially page 3. Sandra's hands were shaking now. She flipped to the 3rd page and her face went white. The house, she whispered, is in Lena's name, I said. As of yesterday. Along with the cabin, the boat, and most of our savings. Amazing what you can accomplish with proper estate planning. You can't do this, she said, but her voice was barely audible now. I already did. Lena finally spoke up. Dad, what's happening? I looked at my daughter, smart, kind, nothing like the mess her mother was making, and said, Your mother has decided to start a new life. I'm making sure she gets to do that without taking yours with her. Sandra sat down hard, still staring at the papers. The fight had gone out of her. She was finally understanding that while she'd been planning her dramatic exit, I'd been planning her landing. When? Sandra asked. Her voice was different now. Smaller. When what? When did you know? I could have lied. Could have said I figured it out recently. But Lena deserved the truth and Sandra had lost the right to gentle treatment. The hotel receipt from Cedar Rapids, I said. 6 months ago. Sandra's mother, Joyce, spoke up for the first time. What hotel receipt? Sandra shot me a look that could have melted steel. She didn't want her mother to know about Troy. She'd probably planned to introduce him gradually, after the divorce was final. Paint me as the problem. Her as the victim who found love again. Sandra went to a wellness seminar, I said, except the seminar was in her head, and Troy was the guest speaker. Sandra, Joyce said slowly. What is he talking about? It's not what you think, Mom. It's exactly what you think, I said. 6 months of lies, 6 months of sneaking around, 6 months of planning to blow up our family at our daughter's graduation dinner. Troy shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the narrative they'd crafted. In their version, I was the boring husband who'd driven Sandra away through neglect. She was the woman who'd finally found the courage to choose happiness. They were the love story. But love stories don't usually involve hotel receipts and secret phone calls and lying to your mother about where you've been. I want to know everything, Lena said. Her voice was steady, but I could see tears in her eyes. If you're going to destroy our family in public, I want to know everything. Sandra looked at Troy, then back at Lena. Honey, it's complicated. It's not complicated, I said. Your mother has been having an affair. She planned to announce it tonight after you graduated so she could blame me for ruining your celebration when I got upset. Except I didn't get upset. I got prepared. The silence stretched out. Our friends and family sat frozen, like they were watching a car accident in slow motion. Dennis finally spoke. Paul, how long have you been planning this? 3 months, I said. ever since Sandra mentioned that Troy thought she should consider a career change. "You've been lying to me for 3 months?" Sandra's voice was getting shrill again. "I've been protecting myself for 3 months," I said, "while you've been lying to me for 6. That's when Joyce stood up. Sandra's mother was 78 years old, barely 5 feet tall, but when she was angry, she could fill a room. "Sandra Elizabeth," she said, using Sandra's full name like she was 12 years old again. "You tell me right now what's been going on." Sandra started crying, not the angry tears from before, but the guilty tears of someone who'd been caught. "I didn't plan for it to happen," she said. I felt trapped. Paul works all the time. We never talk anymore. I felt invisible." "So you cheated on him?" Joyce's voice could have cut diamonds. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," Sandra said, looking at Troy for support. But Troy was already backing away from the table. This wasn't the romantic scene he'd signed up for. This was a family mess, and he didn't want any part of it. "I think I should go," he said. "Yeah," I said. "I think you should." He left without another word, walking out of the restaurant like a man escaping a fire. Sandra watched him go and started crying harder. After Troy left, something shifted in the room. The drama was over, but the consequences were just beginning. Sandra wiped her eyes and looked at the papers again. "This can't all be legal," she said. "Dennis?" I asked my brother-in-law. Dennis had been quiet through most of this, but he was a lawyer, and Sandra was asking a legal question. "The post-nuptial agreement is ironclad," he said carefully. "Paul's attorney did good work. Infidelity voids any claim to shared assets acquired during the marriage." "What about alimony?" Sandra asked. "What about it?" "Don't I get alimony?" Dennis looked uncomfortable. "Sandra, you just publicly announced that you're leaving Paul for another man. You handed him everything he needs for a fault divorce. But I gave up my career for our marriage. You worked part-time jobs," Lena said quietly. "Dad paid for everything." Sandra turned to her daughter. "Lena, honey, you don't understand." "I understand that you cheated on my father," Lena said. "I understand that you planned to humiliate him at my graduation dinner, and I understand that he spent 3 months protecting both of us from whatever mess you were planning to make." Joyce nodded. "Your father's a good man, Sandra. He didn't deserve this." "Nobody's asking what I deserve," Sandra said. "Because you threw that away when you started lying," I said. The manager appeared again, looking nervous. "Folks, I hate to interrupt, but other customers are—" "We're leaving," I said. I stood up and put money on the table. Enough to cover our bill and a generous tip for the staff who'd had to witness our family drama. "Paul," Sandra said as I helped Lena with her jacket. "We need to talk." "We just did," I said. "In front of everyone you wanted to impress. You got your moment, Sandra. You told everyone how much better you deserve. Now you get to find out what better looks like when you're 49 years old with no job, no money, and no husband. The house is Lena's. The cars, the boat, the cabin, all in Lena's name. You signed the papers that made it possible. I didn't know what I was signing. You knew exactly what you were signing. Your lawyer explained every clause, you just never thought you'd trigger them." Sandra looked around the table at faces that had been friendly an hour ago and were now cold or sad or disappointed. "Mom," she said to Joyce. Joyce shook her head. "You made your choice, Sandra. Live with it." I kissed Joyce goodbye and shook hands with the men. My sister Beth hugged me tight. "You okay?" she whispered. "I will be," I said. Lena and I walked out together. Sandra called after us, but we didn't stop. In the parking lot, Lena finally broke down. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry she did that to you." I held my daughter while she cried for the family that had just died in a restaurant full of strangers. "It's not your fault," I said. "None of this is your fault." "But graduation was perfect. You graduated with honors from a good school. That's what matters. The rest is just noise." We stood there for a long time, watching cars pull in and out of the parking lot. Normal people having normal dinners, not blowing up their lives for an audience. What happens now? Lena asked. Now we go home, I said, and we figure out what comes next. 3 days later, Sandra called. Paul, we need to talk. About what? About fixing this, about working things out. I was in my office at Driftline Construction, coordinating a shipment to Omaha. Normal work, normal problems with normal solutions. Nothing to work out, I said. You made your choice. Troy and it's not working. He thinks I'm too old for him. I stopped typing and leaned back in my chair. That's not my problem. Paul, please, I made a mistake. I was confused. I'll sign whatever you want. I'll go to counseling. I'll do anything. You'll do anything? Yes. Then don't call me again. I hung up. An hour later, my lawyer called. Sandra's attorney wants to meet, he said. About what? She's claiming the post-nuptial agreement was signed under duress. I laughed. Actually laughed. Dennis Peterson witnessed the signing. So did 2 bank officers. She had her own attorney present. I know. Her claim won't hold up. But she's also asking for a settlement conference. Tell her attorney she can have everything she brought into the marriage, I said. Her clothes, her car, and her debt from the credit card she maxed out buying Troy presents. That's it? That's it. The next morning, Sandra showed up at my house. Our old house. Lena's house now. I'm not letting you in, I said through the door. I just want to talk. So talk. I know you hate me, she said. But Lena shouldn't suffer for my mistakes. Lena's not suffering. She's got a house, a trust fund, and a father who didn't abandon her for a personal trainer. Paul, please. Go home, Sandra. I don't have a home. I opened the door and looked at her. 3 days since the restaurant, and she looked like she'd aged 3 years. No makeup, hair pulled back, wearing clothes I recognized from years ago. You should have thought about that before you decided I was a boring loser, I said, in front of our daughter, at her graduation dinner. Sandra started crying again. I know it was wrong, but I can't take it back. No, I said. You can't. I closed the door and went back to my coffee. Normal coffee in a normal kitchen in a house that was finally peaceful. 6 months later, I was fixing the fence in the backyard when Lena came out with 2 beers. How's school? I asked. Good. Mom called again. Sandra had been calling Lena every week since the divorce was finalized. Lena usually listened politely and then came to tell me about the conversation. What did she want this time? She's working at a fitness center in Ankeny, part-time. She wanted to know if I'd ask you about Christmas. What about Christmas? If she could come. I hammered another nail into the fence post. What did you tell her? I told her she made her choice. That's my girl. We sat on the porch and drank our beers in comfortable silence. The yard looked good, better than it had when Sandra lived here and complained about everything that needed fixing. Do you miss her? Lena asked. I thought about it, really thought about it. I miss who I thought she was, I said, but I don't miss the woman who stood up in that restaurant and tried to destroy us both for her own entertainment. Good, Lena said, because Troy dumped her for someone younger. I looked at my daughter. How do you know that? Rebecca told me. She works at the gym. I started laughing, couldn't help it. It's not funny, Dad. No, I said, wiping my eyes. It's perfect. We finished our beers and watched the sun set over a yard that belonged to us. Just us. No drama. No lies. No personal trainers. Sandra had gotten exactly what she deserved. A chance to find out if the grass was really greener on the other side. Turned out it wasn't.